The Chernobyl disaster was a devastating nuclear disaster that occurred early in the morning on April 26, 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Pripyat, Ukraine. At the time, Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union laws and government. The event was the worst nuclear power accident in the history of nuclear power. Unfortunately, due to the lack of a containment building to conceal the radiation drifted over parts of Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, the UK, Eastern United States, and Scandinavia. Also, large areas of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus were badly contaminated. In fact, about 60% of radiation landed in Belarus. More than 350,000 people were required to evacuate and relocate to other places after the accident. Chernobyl was the only accident of commercial nuclear power to cause fatalities from radiation. Chernobyl was a tragic disaster that could have been avoided if the right maintenance actions would have been taken into place. The nuclear power can be a safe source of energy if handled properly. If not, it can be very deadly and can lead to something like the Chernobyl disaster itself, or maybe even worse.
Before the event of the Chernobyl disaster, the town of Pripyat was a home for many people. It was an odd place to live, being right next to a nuclear power plant, but the people living there didn't mind. Like other cities built to serve high-technology industries central to the Soviet economy or national defense, this was a planned model city with more spacious housing, including three-room flats for management, better schools, easier access to consumer perks like cars. It offered garages, entertainment, recreational beaches, a large telephone exchange, strong public transportation, healthcare, and the perception of prestige in a wider society. The city of Pripyat was under incessant construction from 1970 all the way to the time of the 1986 accident. 2 reactors out of a planned total of 6 remain unfinished at the site. Construction workers came and went as needed. Life was full of inconvenience of noise and heavy equipment, as well as the regular celebrations for various progress milestones, completion of house projects. Successive startup of each of the plant's 4 reactors, cityhood status in 1879. But with this construction, this was looking like a city with a very good future.
It all started on April 26, 1986 at 1:23 a.m. Reactor 4 suffered a catastrophic power increase, leading to explosions at its core. This unleashed large quantities of radioactive fuel into the environment. This accident occurred during an experiment scheduled to test a potential safety emergency core cooling feature, which took place during a normal shutdown procedure. The operating crew was planning to test whether the turbines could produce enough sufficient energy to keep the coolant plants running in the event of a loss of power, until the emergency diesel generator was activated. But what happened before? Before the actual disaster, to prevent any interruptions to the power of the reactor, the safety systems were deliberately switched off to conduct the test. The reactors had to be powered down to 25% of its capacity. This procedure did not go according to plan, and the reactor power level fell to less than 1%. The power therefore had to be slowly increased, but 30 seconds after the start of the test, there was an unexpected power surge. The reactor's emergency shutdown failed. The reactor's fuel elements ruptured, and there was a violent explosion. The 1,000-ton ceiling cap of the reactor building was blown off. At temperatures of over 2,000 Celsius, the fuel rods melted. The graphite covering of the reactor then ignited. The graphite burned for 9 days, churning huge quantities of radiation into the environment. The accident released more radiation than the deliberate dropping of a nuclear bomb on Hiroshima, Japan, in August 1945. Soviet scientists reported that the Chernobyl 4 reactor contained about 190 metric tons of uranium dioxide fuel and fission products. An estimated 13% to 30% of this escaped into the atmosphere. Contamination from the accident scattered irregularly, depending on weather conditions. Reports from Soviet and Western scientists indicated that Belarus received about 60% of the contamination that fell on the former Soviet Union. A large area in the Russian Federation south of Briznak also was contaminated, as were parts of northwestern Ukraine. But what were some of the effects? Many effects of the Chernobyl disaster were seen in Russia, Europe, and will be seen worldwide. Cesium-137, a radioactive isotope, has a half-life of 30 years. Half-life is how long it takes for half of the material to break into into other forms. Cesium-137 enters the body by eating food and traveling in blood. Resembling potassium chemically, cesium-137 is absorbed by humans in the same way, irradiating the entire body. Radiocesium remains in the body only a few months, but causes many effects. This was the most popular element used in Chernobyl, and is very unstable. Almost all radiation-induced mutations are harmful, and the effects continue through following generations.
A curie is a radioactive particle. About 3 million curies of radiocesium were released into the environment by Chernobyl's meltdown. 14,000 to 39,000 deaths from cancer and from radiation in over 50 areas will be because of the radiocesium from Chernobyl's half deaths from USSR, other half from Western and Eastern Europe. Prediction of 280,000 cancer deaths worldwide will come from Chernobyl. Down syndrome in fall zones rose 83%. Thyroid cancer has increased greatly in children in Russia. 6,600 terminal cancers from radiation occurred, and important chromosome errors were found in the population after the meltdown. Hearing tests conducted after the incidents found 40% hearing impaired. 116,000 people were forced to leave their homes after the accident. 125,000 people were contaminated. 100,000 square kilometer area, also leaving the land radiated for decades. These poison zones cannot be used for crops, or the poison will enter the food chain, causing more damage. Unprepared and uneducated about a nuclear disaster, cleanup crews were taking a lunch break at the site of the damaged reactor, wearing no protective headgear or clothing as they sat on the ground eating sandwiches. 5,000 workers trying to fix the leak in Chernobyl's dome died horrible deaths. Cleanup crews did not know xenon was a highly poisonous gas and was dangerous until it began to kill many of the workers. The firefighters that got to the reactor right away were told to stay only 45 seconds to fight the fire and then to leave the scene. They did not understand the seriousness of the situation and stayed to work. All of the firefighters that went to the reactor died of the radiation poisoning. The USSR did little research or planning for a nuclear disaster like Chernobyl, and the impact was much worse because of this. After Chernobyl, many of the Russian and global reactors increased in safety drastically. Soviets recognized and emphasized that the disaster was caused by human error, and the plant director, absent during the experiment, received a 10-year prison sentence. Valery Legostov, the reactor architect, was mentally destroyed by guilt because of his fear of design faults and technical shortcomings. He committed suicide shortly after the incident. The Soviets had a reputation for a great nuclear power program, and the nuclear industry everywhere wanted to believe a similar disaster couldn't happen. Many people believe that the nuclear power is unsafe. The evidence over 6 decades shows that nuclear power is unsafe, is a safe means of generating electricity. The risk of accident in nuclear power plants is low and declining. The consequences of an accident or terrorist attack are minimal compared with other commonly accepted risks. Although Chernobyl is very costly, it could have been avoided. Nuclear power is safe if handled properly and by people who have the right training and know what to do. Even with the tourism in Chernobyl, it doesn't exactly mean that it's a livable place. It's just a place where people want to see where one of the world's biggest accidents occurred. And for the places where they actually tour, they need gas masks on in the radioactive parts, and the gas masks themselves can only withstand for about an hour or so. So with the factors of the radiation, which is very hard and non-cost efficient, it would be hard for Pripyat to be a livable place again like it was before. Chernobyl would have never happened if the workers were right for the job. Most of the mistakes were mental decisions were made by the higher authority workers at the plant. Sadly, these decisions were the wrong ones. The ignorance of the workers who knew the risk of going through with the operations what caused this disaster to happen. This accident has changed the whole look on nuclear power, and many new safety procedures have been used to hopefully have never a nuclear accident again.